Idaho's choice for news, talk, and Broncos. This is 580 KIDO. KIDOAM.com. The news you need starts right now.
Welcome to a brand new podcast. This is Everything with Everett, a podcast dedicated to hosting important conversations. Everything with Everett is hosted by Everett McConaughey from Boise, Idaho. Everett is an Idaho native who is ready to share his thoughts and observations on a wide variety of subjects. Politics, science, faith, religion, technology, and so much in between. How did we get here? What can we learn from each other? How can we put the past into a healthy conversation that helps us grow tomorrow? This is Everything with Everett, a conversation worth having. Hello everybody, welcome back to a new episode of Everything with Everett. Are you getting tired of all the politics like I am and the current events of the world? Not that they're not important, but it's nice to take a break every now and then. One of the things that I like about my podcast, my goal for it, is that we don't focus on one genre of discussion. So, I thought we should take a break from the current events and timely info and have a little bit of fun with some history. So today I would like to talk about my very first employer. I was a little bit of a nerd on them. Back when I was going to college, I did a speech on them for my communications class. Very fitting. Talk about your employer at a radio station. And I got some great information, historic audio, as well as audio that I obtained myself from our systems at work, which now are historic in nature because they don't use it anymore. Anyway, so the station that I'm going to be talking to you about is station KIDO in Boise, Idaho. It is Boise's very first licensed radio station and has quite an extensive history. There are several periods of the station, starting from 1919 at station 7YA, 22 became KFAU, 1928 became KIDO, and 59 it was owned by Masabi Western, part of Bill Boeing and the Boeing airline equipment company. In 76 it was owned by Western Broadcasting, 79 Sundance Broadcasting, 97 it was owned by J-Corps, and then they sold to Clear Channel Communications, which is iHeartMedia nowadays. In 2007, the station was owned by Peak Broadcasting. I worked for Clear Channel for 3 months and was part of the sell into Peak Broadcasting, and I worked for Peak Broadcasting till my departure in 2010. They are currently owned by Town Square Media. Peak Broadcasting does not exist anymore, but it's the same people at the building. So in 1920, radio begins in Idaho. The first broadcasting on low power station 7YA and shortwave station 7XT. X means experimental, and Y stood for educational. They had a tower located on the rooftop of Boise High School, and the studios were located under the stage at Boise High in the auditorium. It's now the green room, if you ever get to go down underneath the stage area of Boise High School. Some really cool pictures from when it was a radio studio. But it was started by Harry Redeker, a physics and chemistry teacher, to teach enlistees, soldiers during World War I, about how to do Morse code for the war. They started broadcasting concerts, music events, and like speech type content instead of just dits and dots on the radio waves. They were then told by the FCC, hey, if you're going to do that, you need to become a fully commercial licensed radio station. So they filed, and were given the call letters. They were all alphabetically assigned at that point. You couldn't request a call letter. Now you can request call letters if you start a radio station. They were assigned call letters KFAU and became Boise's first licensed radio station on July 18th, 1920. Harry Redeker, the teacher, becomes the first licensed operator. Upgraded their equipment in 1925. NBC launched a radio network of 25 stations. KIDO, or the station, eventually would become part of the NBC network. The Boise School Board in 1928 sells KFAU to a gentleman by the name of KIDO Phillips. There's a rumor that why it's called KIDO is in honor of him, KIDO. KIDO moves to the 4th floor of the Elks building at 9th and Jefferson with a tower antenna on the roof broadcasting with 1,000 watts on November 5th, 1928. And that is the birthday of KIDO, the station we have today. In 1930, September, KIDO upgraded their transmitter and relocates the twin towers. I believe they had one of those antennas with the wire that goes between the two towers. So they had 2 towers to broadcast from. They located them to South Junior High Field off Owyhee Street. And in September, they moved the studios to the basement of the new Hotel Boise, which is now the Hoff Building. And there's a very popular program that took off from there. In 1931, KIDO is authorized to use the frequency of 1350. It's a really cool picture that Art let me see. I actually have a copy of it. Showing, I guess, the predecessor to what, like Boise, kind of like the Boise Hawks, it was the local baseball team. And on the back, they had the scoreboard and kind of the outfield part of the field. And it had the big old, like, cutouts of the wood. It said 1350 KIDO. And then on one side, it had Idaho Power as a sponsor. And then on the other side, I believe there was something about the Boise Airport, like airfield. And I believe at that point, the airfield was actually where the stadium is at Boise State University. It was very rural back then. So in 1931, authorized for 1350 frequency. 1933, high winds destroyed the twin towers at South Junior High, and they erected a single tower to replace them. In 1934, on the 15th, William Edward Borah, senator, sends a telegram saying that the FCC has authorized KIDO to up the power from up to 2,500 watts during the day, and nighttime remains at 1,000 watts. So they were at 1,000 full-time by that point. In 1936, June of that year, KIDO moves to the beautiful new studios in the mezzanine of Hotel Boise. Their new transmitter site with a 235-foot tower was installed at Collister next to the river. And I believe that's where the first Channel 7 tower was later put about 20 years later. In 1937, KIDO becomes an affiliate of NBC. That was on October 1st, 1937. There was the Red and Blue Network. They got new equipment, tape arrives, cutting lathes, wire recorders. Basically, it's the beginning of new technology for radio, kind of the evolution of what we see now. Fun fact for you. NBC radio, before there was NBC television, obviously. I think that was kind of starting out, but they were primarily radio. They were so big that they were broken up, and I believe NBC Blue was the smaller network, and that was sold off, and from my understanding, that became ABC Radio that was actually still around, not part of ABC anymore, but ABC Radio was a former NBC Blue network. That's kind of those legacy stations. And that infrastructure, ABC Radio, went the way of the dodo. I believe in January or just a few months ago, but in 2020, it was shut down by Cumulus Media. At least that's what I've read. In 1947, in January, KIDO FM goes on the air from the 9th floor of the Hotel Boise. It was on the air for 6 hours a day with an antenna on the roof near the Hotel Boise sign. The station went off the air very soon due to no receivers in the area. Not many people had enough money to go buy a brand new technology called the FM radio. That was just AM back then. And radio stations were full service. It wasn't talk on the AM and music on the FM. It was everything. It was full service. They had music, they had news. It was just full, well-rounded programming, and people gather around the radio at night and listen to some live performances, music. I even heard a story that they used to use the old telegraph wires that ran between like Boise and Nampa, and apparently would hijack the wires from Union Pacific so that they could run a remote broadcast from like Nampa High or Boise High, because back in the day, those were the two biggest schools. Those are the only schools. There wasn't all the schools we have now. And so I guess there was the big to-do was the football game between Boise High and Nampa High. And they would hijack the telegraph wires for a couple of hours, broadcast their game with the audio being sent between the main studio and the remote at the field. And then they would hurry up, wrap up the broadcast, slip the wires back into connection just in time for the clocks to update at the top of the next hour after the broadcast. Pretty cool little history there. In 1946 and 1947, competitors come on the air to KIDO, news stations. KGEM, which was 1140, is now a Catholic radio station. They came on, and at the time, probably not right away, but they, for a while, were Idaho's most powerful radio station at 10,000 watts. They were almost double the power of most of the AM stations in the area before KBOI went 50,000 watts in 1967. KDSH came on the air in 1947. That station became KBOI, but they were definitely just starting out, and they were an early competitor to KIDO. But KIDO was definitely the stronger signal at the time, more power transmitting. They were kind of the father of radio. Well, they were the father of radio. In 1950, KIDO moves the studios to the entire second floor of the Chamber of Commerce building on Idaho Street between Capitol Boulevard and 8th Street, and they added new equipment. In 1951, on March 18th, KIDO moves to frequency AM 630 with 5,000 watts day and night and a new RCA transmitter with 3-tower directional array. That's currently the AM 630 transmitter site. It's out Cloverdale Road off of Hubbard. And I believe from what I read a few years ago, it's the third largest in terms of the spread, geographical spread. There's a mile between the farthest east and the farthest west tower, and it's the third largest antenna array in the United States. In 1952, KIDO files for TV station Channel 7. 1953, July 12th, KIDO TV goes on the air as Idaho's second television station, with studios and transmitter on Crestline Drive in Boise Hills Village. The very first station was actually KFXD, I believe, Channel 6. No, Channel 2 was, Channel 2 was first. They were up on the mountain where they currently, all the transmitters are now above Boise next to Bogus. They were the pioneers of doing that. I think I have that right. Anyway, Channel 2 was for sure the first one up on Deer Point, up near Bogus. I don't know if they were the very first station. KFXD Channel 6 was, I think, the first TV station, and they didn't last very long. And in 1959, KIDO is sold to the Boeing subsidiary company of the Boeing Company of Seattle. Studios are moved to the Hubbard transmitter site, and then to Vista and Overland. There's a really cool building at Vista and Overland, and it's still, the building that those studios were in still stands. And I'd like to play some cool jingles that Art from the History of Idaho Broadcasting Foundation gave me. These are jingles from KIDO in the mid-50s and 60s.
KIDO in Boise, KIDO Radio.
Our sounds are getting better all the time.
Sound 63 in Boise, oh, we love you so.
Our sounds are getting better all the time. Back home again in dear old Boise on KIDO, KIDO. You'll get listening, that's fun for you in our town. When you tune 63 on radio. Our sound is tasty as a cherry pie. Sound 63 is on the go. Who'll be the apple blossom of your eye? KIDO. You're hearing that happy sound. We're mighty happy to have you around, to play the music that you want us to bring you the news while the news is new. You'll never go wrong, 'cause there's always a song and a smile on your radio dial at 630. That sounds 63 KIDO. This is KIDO. Boise's better listening. Your dial is set on 630.
So for all of the news and music to chase your blues,
It's KIDO, the best on radio. Way out upon the waves you will hear the sound of KIDO at 630. In Boise on the go, top in radio listening. Way out with KIDO Radio. It must have been KIDO at 630, 'cause you do the great show on KIDO, KIDO.
it seems to me I've heard that sound before. You bet that Boise knows the score. Get all the greatest radio. No need for dialing, I found. I've got 630 around. That's Boise's big KIDO.
I love to hear KIDO, KIDO. Want you to know KIDO, KIDO. At 630 in Boise, Idaho.
to go. Keep that radio dial at 630.
It's listening designed
With you in mind on Sound 63 KIDO in Boise. 63 KIDO. KIDO.
In September 15th of 1975, KIDO changed their format from middle of the road, a little bit of everything, to a younger-based adult contemporary genre. The next year, on July 1st, 1976, KIDO is sold to Western Broadcasting Company of Missoula, Montana. Tons of staff changes come up, and they filed for their FM station of 104.3, which is still owned by the same group. At the time, it was, I believe their call letters on that one was KIDQ. And they didn't have true stereo back then, so what they would do is they would do one channel on AM and one channel on FM. And so you could listen to stereo if you had one on each side. But I believe that I don't think that they truly simulcasted everything like KBOI did on their FM. In 1977, KIDO changes format to rock and tries to compete head-to-head with KFXD, drops NBC, and KBOI picks up NBC News. In 1978, KIDO changes format again to a progressive album rock genre. In May of 1979, the Sundance Broadcasting Company by KIDO switch the format to urban cowboy country and call it the radio station, and change the name to KIDO. Sounds just like Idaho, get it? And apparently somebody said, I'd rather be in Idaho listening to KIDO, like Idaho. Their FM, KIDQ FM, Q104 goes on the air on November 1st, 1979. It was a rock format as well. I think I have a bumper sticker from that. In 1985, KIDO becomes Sunny 63 and moves towards a news talk format in the evenings. And subsequently in 1989, KIDO becomes News Talk 630 KIDO, then News Radio 630 KIDO. So here is a sound check of a song into a news break from January of New Year's Day, I believe, of 1986.
KIDO with Barbra Streisand from the movie Funny Girl. People who love people. On Sunny 63, half a minute away from CBS News at 5 o'clock. As the sun sets, yes, the sun sets, and you can see it setting. Isn't it nice to have some blue sky and warm temperatures for the next couple of days? Highs will be in the mid-30s, thereabouts, and lows tonight in the mid to upper teens. That's where our highs have been for the last 3 weeks. Currently it's 33 at Sunny 63. This is KIDO Boise at 5 o'clock.
This is The World Tonight. Good evening. I'm Christopher Glenn, CBS News. A voice from the Kremlin heard in the United States.
I wish you a happy new year. To every American family, I wish good health, peace, and happiness.
And a voice from the White House heard in the Soviet Union.
On behalf of the American people, I wish you all a happy and healthy new year. Let's work together to make it a year of peace.
It was a historic occasion on this New Year's Day, this exchange of greetings and goodwill. Mark Phillips reports from Moscow.
For the first time since 1972, when Richard Nixon did it, an American president directly addressed the Soviet people. President Reagan tonight wished the Soviet Union, in Russian, clear skies, an old expression of goodwill. The rest of the president's message was delivered in English, but with a Russian translation and with more goodwill. The president told the Soviets that he hoped the results of the Geneva summit meeting could be built on in the coming year, but in moderate terms he also outlined some of the areas that will present the greatest difficulties. He talked about his hopes for developing defensive systems, the Star Wars program the Russians are dead set against. And he outlined his views on human rights, calling for freedom of speech, movement, assembly, and worship.
Respect for all people is essential to peace. And as we agreed in Geneva, progress in resolving humanitarian issues in a spirit of cooperation would go a long way to making 1986 a better year for all of us.
The Soviets, as they had agreed, carried his remarks in full and also broadcast Mikhail Gorbachev's address to the American people. Mark Phillips, CBS News, Moscow.
The Gorbachev greetings to Americans after this.
I do have the full audio clip of that, but we don't have time for that right now. I just thought it was kind of cool, the historic of the Soviet Union before the Russia we have today. So going on, KIDO switches in, I believe, let me look at the history here, between 89 and 93. So right around 89, I believe, they switched to their all news and talk format. 93, legacy member John Duane took over the morning show. He passed away a few years ago. I went to his funeral. Really great guy. His co-host Chris Kelly joined the show right around that time. By 96, 99, KIDO was sold to Sundance and Colfax, who sells to J-Core, who then sells to Clear Channel quite a bit. I remember there were lots of things going on. I was like 7, hanging out in the newsroom at KIDO at that point. And I remember a lot of hearing weird things about that. In 2001, Clear Channel moved the KIDO studios to their current location, beautiful new studios on Park Boulevard. That is where I started working for KIDO in 2006. On August 12th, 2002, KIDO moves from 6:30 a.m. to 580 on the dial, and KFXD moves from 580 to AM 630. In 2006, John Duane and Chris Kelly resigned from the morning show due to non-negotiables with Clear Channel, and the current era of their format took over.
First with the story, first with the news, first on your radio. 580 News Radio KIDO. You steer, we'll navigate.
At the next intersection, turn.
Traffic and weather together on the 10s on 580 News Radio KIDO.
For 80 years, KIDO has been an Idaho leader. That tradition continues today. It's time for Kevin Miller in the morning. Kevin Miller in the morning. Boise's Talk Radio Evolution starts now. 580 KIDO.
And then they obviously took over the Broncos, and I realized that I actually was producing the show the night that they announced that they were going to go to the Fiesta Bowl. And so that was kind of cool. So I saved this little clip.
It'll be a fiesta, a party. Kevin Miller, thanks so much for being down here tonight at the Double R Ranch Club. Enjoyed it.
Bob,
and I will see you tomorrow morning.
Thanks for keeping me out of trouble.
For Kevin Miller, for our technical assistant, Lee Eichelberger, we thank him. For Taylor McConaughey in the studio for getting us on the air tonight. This is Bob Beeler saying so long from the Double R Ranch Club in the Stickle.
Oh. Cut him off. Same button. Whoops. Anyway. So, hopefully a nice change of pace from the past podcasts that I've been doing. A little something different. That's kind of the way I want this podcast to be going. Keep changing it up. Talk about something that matters. Talk about something that you can enjoy. And if you live in the Boise area, something that might actually apply to where you live. Don't think I'm going to make the time this week. That was a lot more information than I thought I actually had. So it was definitely, this is my take number 2. So we'll try to keep it about 30 minutes normally, but probably going to be a little bit over. We'll make up for it the rest of the month, I'm sure. We'll cut some time off. Anyway, it's been a pleasure to spend time with you wherever you choose to listen. Be sure to visit everettmcconaughey.com/podcast to find out where to subscribe. We are on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts, Deezer, and so many more. Also, a YouTube version of the podcast available. All of the information that you could possibly want to know at my website, everettmcconaughey.com/podcast. Do you have thoughts or questions? Let me know. Text me, 208-391-2808. Love to hear what you have to say. If you want to provide a voice input, go ahead and call it. Go straight to voicemail, leave a message. I'd be happy to follow up on a future podcast. Thank you for your time. It has been a privilege and an honor to get to grace your ears today. And I hope you have a great week, and we'll talk to you next time. You can join the conversation anytime. Call or text 208-391-2808. Also, you can connect on Twitter. Look for @EverettPodcast. Listen to all available episodes of Everything with Everett, as well as find out where to subscribe. More information at everettmcconaughey.com/podcast.